Chelsea Clinton has steadily evolved into a global voice for change, emerging from the long political shadow of her parents to carve a meaningful path defined by advocacy, intellect, and a tireless drive for progress. In 2025, her leadership at the Clinton Global Initiative, CGI, placed her once again at the forefront of international efforts to combat systemic challenges, especially those affecting women, children, and marginalized communities. Under the banner Chelsea Clinton Champions Global Change at CGI 2025, she did not simply stand as a figurehead, but led a strategic and impassioned movement that brought new energy and relevance to the Clinton Foundation's ongoing mission. As vice chair of the foundation, Chelsea has long had her finger on the pulse of global needs, but the 2025 CGI gathering marked a definitive moment in her career. With a world still reeling from the long-term impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, climate disasters, growing economic inequality, and political unrest, Chelsea's work took on a renewed urgency. Her message was clear. Solutions must be inclusive, bold, and intersectional. Chelsea began her address at CGI 2025 by acknowledging the intense weight the world currently bears, noting that while technology and global awareness have brought people closer than ever before, they have also exposed the cracks in our systems. She highlighted the disproportionate burdens carried by women and girls around the world, lack of access to education, reproductive health care, safety, and economic opportunities, and made a passionate call for systemic change. Her voice, measured but intense, cut through the conference's formalities as she posed a challenge to the leaders gathered. If we are not working for equity, then what are we working for? Chelsea's words were not just a rhetorical flourish. They set the tone for what would become one of the most forward-thinking and action-driven CGI meetings in years. The initiative launched more than 160 new commitments across 35 countries, many of them focused on programs tailored to women, girls, and communities on the front lines of climate change. Unlike typical political figures, Chelsea Clinton blends academic depth with real-world pragmatism. With degrees from Stanford, Oxford, and Columbia, she brings a formidable intellectual foundation to every conversation she enters. But what distinguishes her most is her refusal to lean solely on credentials or family legacy. She listens, she collaborates. At CGI 2025, this was especially evident as she moderated panels that featured grassroots organizers alongside CEOs, youth climate activists beside seasoned policymakers. She made it clear that the problems of the world will not be solved in echo chambers or boardrooms alone. They require community-based input and leadership from those who experience these issues firsthand. In one particularly emotional session, Chelsea introduced a group of Afghan girls who, despite facing political and educational repression in their home country, managed to build a virtual school network for other girls in exile. She spoke with genuine admiration, elevating their courage as a model of leadership in action. Chelsea's impact at CGI 2025 was not just felt in the headlines, but in the stories of the people she worked with. She personally led breakout sessions on reproductive justice, childhood nutrition, and vaccine equity. Drawing from her own work with the Clinton Health Access Initiative, she was quick to connect abstract policy with the lived realities of millions. In one such panel, she recalled visiting health clinics in rural sub-Saharan Africa, where mothers walked miles just to get basic medication for their children. She did not romanticize their struggle. She demanded global accountability for it. And more importantly, she presented practical frameworks to close these gaps. That was Chelsea's real strength, not simply identifying problems, but offering scalable, measurable solutions. In her personal interactions, Chelsea's sincerity stood out. Conference attendees noted how approachable and grounded she was, often seen engaging with students, young entrepreneurs, and nonprofit workers between panels. Her focus on youth leadership was a standout theme at CGI 2025. She announced a major partnership between the Clinton Foundation and several global universities to fund youth-led innovation projects in underserved communities. This initiative, rooted in the belief that young people should be trusted as architects of the future, was lauded by educators and youth advocates alike. Through it, hundreds of young changemakers would gain access to mentorship, funding, and global platforms to accelerate their ideas. For Chelsea, this was not charity, it was investment. Away from the stage, Chelsea Clinton has always balanced public service with a deep commitment to her family. She and her husband, Mark Mazvinsky, are raising 3 children, Charlotte, Aiden, and Jasper, while living in New York. She often references her children as a constant source of inspiration, frequently stating that the world they inherit should be more just and inclusive than the one we live in now. Her role as a mother has visibly deepened her advocacy, particularly in areas such as maternal health, childhood nutrition, and early childhood education. At CGI 2025, she shared a personal anecdote about navigating postpartum care in the U.S., a country with one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the developed world, and how that experience drove her to support better healthcare policies for women. Her candidness created a ripple of relatability throughout the conference, reminding many that the issues CGI tackles are not distant. They are personal. Chelsea's voice also carries weight in the publishing world, particularly among younger audiences. Her She Persisted children's book series has become a staple in classrooms across America. It celebrates the lives of trailblazing women in history, from Harriet Tubman to Greta Thunberg, and continues to empower children with narratives of courage, resilience, and change. In 2025, she announced an expansion of the series to include stories from around the world, highlighting women activists, scientists, and artists from diverse backgrounds. The global edition of She Persisted would be translated into multiple languages and distributed in partnership with UNICEF to underserved schools worldwide. This move, timed alongside the CGI conference, perfectly encapsulated Chelsea's dual ability to reach hearts and influence policy. Despite her high-profile status, Chelsea Clinton has always kept her political cards close to her chest. Although she has been encouraged to run for office for years, she has consistently deferred, focusing instead on activism and policy advocacy. But in 2025, speculation about her political future began to resurface with more intensity. Her powerful performance at CGI, combined with her growing influence on global issues, led to a resurgence in public and media interest in whether she would eventually seek elected office. When asked directly, Chelsea responded with characteristic poise. "I care deeply about public service, and I will always find ways to contribute, whether or not that means holding public office." Her answer left the door open, and many of her supporters believe it is only a matter of time. Chelsea's prominence in 2025 also stands in contrast to the wave of misinformation and conspiracy theories that continue to target high-profile figures, especially women in public life. She has been no stranger to online attacks and baseless rumors, often stemming from her family's political legacy. But rather than retreat, she has chosen to fight disinformation head-on. At CGI, she moderated a discussion on media literacy and the impact of social media algorithms on truth. She called on tech companies to do more in regulating harmful content and pledged support for programs that educate young people on digital responsibility. Her voice in this space has become increasingly respected, particularly among parents and educators who see the daily impact of online toxicity. As the final moments of the 2025 Clinton Global Initiative unfolded, the atmosphere in the Grand Hall was charged with a deep and palpable energy. It wasn't just the culmination of 3 days of intensive discussion, collaboration, and action. It was a profound recognition of a transformative moment. Chelsea Clinton had emerged as a central force of progress, her presence no longer rooted merely in heritage, but in her own legacy of conviction, clarity, and courage. Attendees from every corner of the globe, NGO leaders, heads of state, students, and corporate changemakers, rose to their feet not simply in admiration, but in solidarity with a woman whose work had reached beyond rhetoric to touch the very fabric of people's lives. It was clear that Chelsea was no longer seen as a figure adjacent to history, but as a driving force within it. Throughout the conference, her capacity to unify voices that often remained disconnected was nothing short of remarkable. She orchestrated dialogue between those on the front lines of climate migration and those crafting international finance policy. She introduced Indigenous women leading environmental justice movements in the Amazon to young entrepreneurs developing sustainable technologies in Southeast Asia. She ensured that every commitment announced on stage was backed by community insights, scientific data, and a long-term accountability framework. Chelsea made inclusivity a practice, not just a talking point. Her insistence that no voice be left unheard shifted the dynamic of the event from a series of elite declarations to a symphony of shared responsibility. Moreover, Chelsea Clinton's unique blend of emotional intelligence and intellectual rigor allowed her to bridge generational divides. While elder statespeople praised her diplomatic finesse, younger leaders were drawn to her openness and authenticity. She didn't posture or perform. She listened, responded, and led with clarity of purpose. Her ability to weave personal narrative into policy conversations gave her words a rare weight. When she spoke of maternal mortality, she referenced not only statistics but her own lived experience. When addressing climate change, she didn't just cite reports. She recalled the names and faces of people she had met in disaster-stricken areas. In doing so, she reminded the world that progress is not an abstraction. It is measured in human dignity, safety, and opportunity. By the end of CGI 2025, Chelsea Clinton had not only convened one of the most consequential gatherings in the initiative's history, she had redefined what leadership looks like in an era of complexity and crisis. The applause that echoed through the hall was layered with respect, hope, and admiration for a leader who has not only embraced the weight of global challenges, but who has made it her life's work to lighten that burden for others. In stepping confidently into her own voice, Chelsea has inspired a new generation to do the same, ensuring that the ripple effects of her vision will continue to shape the future for years to come.